So I got my fleet of trucks up here on the table, but they're not up there being broken or anything. Today I'm going to talk about transmissions. This is another video that I wish somebody else would have made. Um, Recently, I bought a couple of transmissions for this truck and that truck. This one and the little guy, they both have standard Tamiya transmissions, but the dump truck and the heavy hauler Scania, they both have the Lesu two-speed transmissions in them. So I'm going to talk about them real quick and show you what I found and tell you how I think how they compare with the Tamiya transmission. Well, first thing, on my dump truck here, I have it standing up here precariously. Kind of nervous about that. But I just recently refurbished this truck and took it from the old transmission, which was a Tamiya transmission. And it lasted for 7 years, and really it was nothing wrong with it. Matter of fact, I put it in the little guy there, the little dump truck. That's my little spare parts truck I just made from parts laying around. But this guy actually has this guy's transmission. Well, I put the Lesu transmission in this one. You can see here, there's the transfer case for it. Let me see if we can get a better picture of it. You know, there it is on here. It's a 2-speed. Here's a shift servo, and it comes across down to right there where the red rod connects to it. And on this truck, just to give you a little background, I'm using TLT Tamiya front axles. Well, you know, front and back. The steering is linked by one servo in the middle. Lesu tires and wheels. You know, Tamiya rear axles. Those guys in the back are really old, so they do look ratty because they are old and ratty. This little beam here is for the lift actuator for the dump truck, and of course a couple of 3D printed parts. But we're not bragging about the truck, we're talking about the transmission. Well, I found on this truck and with the Lesu transmissions are very, very robust, but they're slow. They're really slow. Someone told me that, you know, they're about as slow as the Tamiya's second gear transmission in high gear, but actually they're a little bit less. They're in between the first and second gear in high gear. 1 second, let me flip over the other Actros here, and we'll talk about the Tamiya transmission. Okay, here's the Actros, the semi truck here, and this one, even though this is a Hercules Hobbies truck, but it's still technically, you know, Tamiya transmission. I mean, the transmissions are identical. Really, the whole thing on the truck is identical, except for the rear axles. The rear axles are their own design, and they have a locking differential system. That's what all these wires here going to the servo is. But, you know, it's standard Tamiya 3-speed transmission, very strong, really fast, almost too fast for a semi-truck in my case. You know, that's why I'm actually liking the dump truck, even though it's just a little too slow for me, but I can deal with it because, you know, it's a dump truck. It's not doing rocket speeds like the old Audi right there. It's a dump truck. So it's, you know, it can be slow. But yeah, everybody who's into these semi-trucks, they understand how the Tamiya transmissions work and, you know, the good parts, the bad parts of them, and, you know, just standard, how everyday, robust, Tamiya style goodness. And in this truck, this one also has a Lesu transmission in it. But this one is a little different. This is the 2-speed transmission from Lesu, but it has a higher speed gear reduction up here. This planetary gearbox is different from this planetary gearbox. I hate doing this, but it's the only way I can show you. But it's different from this planetary gear. This planetary gearbox seems to be slower. And the motor in here, even though they say it's a 27 turn, I'm thinking it's probably more of a 35 turn, because I used to race, and we used to race 27 turns, and 27 turns are actually pretty quick. So I don't think that this is a 27 turn, you know. And of course, you got the Lesu's rear end here with their 2-speed transmission system and their little icon there. But this one, getting back to this truck, not only do I have the 2-speed transmission and the same basic 2-speed system here, but I also have their oh, I'm tired, so you got to deal with me here. They also have their transfer case, and this is a gear reduction. But this gearbox is truly the Tamiya second gear speed. So this one is livable, and it's pretty quick. You put a 3-cell battery pack in it, and this little truck actually kind of moves. The one thing that I've noticed about the transmissions is that the Tamiya truck, you can actually push. That's not a big deal. I mean, you're not supposed to push your trucks, but your RC vehicles in general. But this one actually will roll if you push on it. The Lesu transmissions, they're locked. They're dragging the wheels. They're not free moving. The gear ratio is so low, and there's so many gears in the transmission that they're not moving, which is kind of good if you're climbing something on a hill. It's not going to roll down the hill. It's just going to actually stop, which I've actually done a couple of times. In my local area, we have a park that has a really big historical Indian burial ground. It's a mound, and it's probably a good 200 feet high, and there's a sidewalk that goes up to the top, and I've driven this up that hill, and it's pretty steep, and this truck just rolls down it like it doesn't have any brakes. This one stops dead. So that's kind of a good thing. If you're rock crawling, maybe you want to use the Lesu transmission for that. Now, the good and the bad. Okay, the good, they're all metal gears. Everything in the transmission is metal. The transmission weighs a good pound by itself, which I love the sturdiness. Everything is very well put together. I'm actually really impressed with Lesu parts. A friend of mine on a Facebook page that I'm on kind of turned me on to the Lesu stuff, because I've always been kind of iffy about their products. Again, I'm kind of, I guess, biased to Chinese or Taiwanese. I don't know where they're actually out of, but I'm kind of biased to stuff like that. But somebody turned me on to their components on this truck. I put the leaf springs, and in the second steer axle, the actual little spindles are from Lesu, and they're great. They work really, really well. So I figured when I refurbished this truck that I was going to use their transmission in it, and I'm really happy with it. It's a great transmission. Again, it's a little slow, but it's smooth, it's quiet, it does what it's supposed to do. You can shift the gears with a small servo, which you can actually do with the Tamiya ones, but Tamiya for some reason likes to use big hefty servos for everything. The bad part about the Lesu transmissions is that Lesu uses screws that are very easy to strip sometimes. And on the installation of this truck's transmission, I stripped 3 screws, just trying to tighten it down. And I wasn't really putting a lot of force in them. They just stripped out and rounded off the inside of the Allen key head. The other thing that Lesu transmissions have a bad habit, and just Lesu parts in general, the parts that I've actually bought from them, is that their threads are not really deep. So when you're trying to screw something in, if you're not careful, you can strip out the threads in the actual part. And I've done that a few times, and actually I was very afraid that I ruined the transmission on this truck because I did it with 2 screws. But the way it's mounted in a truck, I think it's going to be fine, just kind of pinned in place. But that is something to watch out for and be very careful of. So use a lot of thread lock and not try to use your brute strength. Just use some thread lock and call it a day. The other thing that I found with their stuff is they don't like to use grease. When I first put the transmissions in both these trucks, and took them out and drove them, they sounded like they were just running completely dry. So when I took the transmission apart, lo and behold, it was actually really, really dry. There was no grease in the truck whatsoever. So I had to re-grease the transmissions and put them back together. And that's kind of scary if you've never taken something apart for the first time. And like all, Chinese parts and Taiwanese parts, they don't really give you instruction manuals with their stuff. So when you take it apart, if you're not being very careful and you're not paying attention or even taking pictures, because I have a hard time remembering many steps, especially if I have to change to do something else and come back to it. If you're not taking pictures of what you're doing or paying very good attention to it, you can get into trouble. But after I did all that, they seem to be very happy. This truck, like I said, is very quiet. It's actually quieter than the Tamiya, the Hercules Hobbies truck here. And it's much quieter than that guy. But this guy right here is running around with an almost 10-year-old transmission in it. And the rear axle in there is pretty much parts that I found in that jar down there. So he's kind of out of the equation. That's why he's sitting on the floor over there instead of up here being talked about. That's the bad part about the Lesu transmission. Now, going back to the Tamiya transmissions or Tamiya style transmissions, well, they do everything you think they do, that everybody's always talked about they do. Like, for example, if you're not careful, the high gear is hard to adjust on your transmitter. You have to make sure you get the throws just right, and and make sure that they're not over stressing the servo. Or it's like a fine line, especially in the third gear. It's a fine line between being in gear and not being in gear. So you got to watch out for that. And also, being Hercules Hobbies and not being an actual Tamiya transmission, I found that like in one of my older videos I posted, the tolerances on the shafts are very, very close. So if they're not greased just right, things will stick. So you got to watch out for that. Then on top of that, you got the standard Tamiya problems. Like one thing I constantly hear from everybody is that the Tamiya trucks are very fast, and they are. This guy right here is running a 45 turn motor, or is it a 35? We can't really see it in there. It's buried. But I think it may be a 35. I've changed these motors out too many times. I don't quite remember what I put in all the trucks. But I think it's running a 35. But with a 35 turn motor, this guy is almost as fast as just a standard silver can. And how Tamiya puts the silver can motors in everything they own. But it's just about as fast, maybe a little bit slower. And being a really tall truck, this truck is actually taller than the Scania. I don't know if you can tell, but that little bit of difference, it may not seem like much, but that little bit of difference makes a major difference when you're trying to turn. So if you're turning at speed and with grippier tires, because this has aftermarket tires on it, it will roll. And as a matter of fact, the little handle that goes here is a casualty of the rolling, and there's scratches along here that are casualty to the rolling. In fact, you can see them right here and here, and I lost the grill because of a roll. That's all happened in the same roll. So it tends to be a little bit too fast for its own good. Now, the other problem that I have with the Tamiya transmissions is how big they are. You know, there's nowhere to put the servos. If you put the transmissions where Tamiya wants you to do it, you know, like I wanted to do in this truck, and this is one of the reasons why I went to a different transmission, the quad steer on one servo, running off of one servo, is near impossible without doing something very complex. And that's all because the Tamiya transmission requires that you put it closer to the front of the truck like they do on all their kits. You know, they're trying to get realism. And to me, it's never really made any sense to have one servo on the side of the truck for steering and one servo on the front of the truck for the transmission. They both should be next to each other like they do on their Hilux rock crawler or Toyota pickup, whatever you want to call it, and how they do on the American style semis. But on the European style semis, they like to put the steering servo off to one side. And that's because there's really no room with the transmission in the truck. Unless you do some crazy thing, which again, like I did on that guy, you know, where you make a custom mount or you buy a custom mount, or you hack up the transmission or move the transmission back or something like that. It's very big and it takes up a lot of room. And also, I really don't see the benefit of the 3 speeds, besides just, you know, something kind of talking. But other than that, I really don't see the benefit of having a 3-speed. But, you know, it's a Tamiya style transmission, or a Tamiya transmission in that guy's case. And they're rock solid. They last forever. That truck right there is going on 10 years old. That cab, that transmission, and that rear axle, and that front axle, those are probably the original truck that I had when I bought the Scania way back almost 10 years ago. You know, so I've never changed the transmission or fixed the gears in it. So, you know, when I built this truck the other day, I took the transmission apart to examine the pieces and made sure that it all worked right, and it looked fine. So again, that's 10 years and it didn't have any problems. So that's a good thing with Tamiya transmissions. You know, and that's how it was in my old Hilux that I had back in the day. That thing, I drove that truck everywhere. It's not really a rock crawler, but I used it as a rock crawler. You know, I jumped it a few times. A couple of times I put a 89 kV brushless motor in it just to see what it'd do, and it never complained. It just ran and ran and ran and ran. So that's, you know, that's the Tamiya transmission. But, you know, just to wrap up the video, because this video right now is getting long, that's my little review on the Lesu transmissions and Tamiya transmissions. I kind of wish somebody would have had a video explaining the Lesu transmission. I know people don't buy a lot of their parts sometimes because their stuff is kind of expensive for what you're getting. And I know their trucks are crazy expensive. To get their version of this truck would have been close to, if not $2,000 to $3,000. You know, and that, again, I might be cheap, but I don't understand why it has to cost that much. I mean, the Hercules hobby truck here was $300 shipped from Taiwan, and it runs perfect, you know, but, you know, whatever. But I wish, like I said, I wish somebody would have had a video of their parts. And as I get more stuff, I'm going to make more videos and explain, you know, try to explain to it. And I'm trying to find videos that people don't really have a lot of on YouTube. You know, one of the problems that I have with all the YouTube channels is that, you know, besides the Generation X rock music going on and the camera going all like this, and, you know, with the truck, they don't really sit down and explain to you how it works. Or with most trucks, they'll sit there and just turn on the lights and the sound and show you that everything works, but they never really explain what did they do to get the lighting system to work, or what did they do to get the truck to work as the way they did, or to look the way they did. I mean, there's a few channels online, and I'm giving a free plug, but there's a guy named RC Sparks. he's pretty good about it. There's another old dude that from Hobby Concepts that's pretty good. You know, and there's a few guys. I'm not going to pick on everybody. There's also RC Kicks that I like to watch because, you know, he does a lot of historical RC Tamiya stuff and, you know, stuff I grew up with. But I'm trying to be a little bit more instructional than most average guy. Well, if you like my channel and you like my videos, subscribe. At the end of this video, I'm going to show pictures of the videos, sorry, of the trucks running and trying to go through the different gears. I don't really know what order, if I'm going to go first, second, third. I did the videos the other day and I'm doing this today. So, you know, so we'll see. If you like the videos, subscribe. Give me some suggestions how to make them better. If you hate hearing my voice, tell me. If you like hearing my voice, tell me that too. You know, try and tell me what you want to see next. I'm open to anything, you know, RC trucks or RC cars. I'm going to come back the other way. Come on.
It's like, nope, I'm too shy.